I use this. Good morning, everyone. The presentation, how do I start it? Can someone please put the presentation? Yeah. Okay. In the meantime, I start like that. In my talk, I'd like to start with some reflections of the biography and concepts of Jung, and then go over to what we can learn from Jung for ayahuasca. Carl Gustav Jung was an introverted, sensitive boy, and he was deeply connected to an inner world. He could spend hours sitting on a stone, questioning himself if he was him or the stone on which he was sitting, playing consciousness games. So thanks. On the left, there's a picture. This introverted personality probably stems from the relationship to his mother, who suffered from periods of melancholia. Sometimes at night he perceived her as another person, crying and being possessed by spirits. She was hospitalized several times, which probably led to an attachment trauma. Later in life, Jung was looking for healing. His feminine part was what led to intense and ambiguous relationships with women. He was a son of a preacher, and he was very interested in the fundamental questions about life and religion. However, Jung was disappointed by his father's academic and soulless approach to faith, who could not answer him his essential questions. Jung then left the path of religious traditionalism in his family and instead pursued psychiatry and medicine, which combined biology and spirituality, exactly what he was looking for. Jung's burning question was, what actually? He tried to make sense to the inner world of psychotic patients, studying them thoroughly. Working as a psychiatrist, Jung was fascinated by Sigmund Freud's theory of psychoanalysis. For some years, they remained a close friendship. In 1903, Jung married Emma Rauschenbach, this woman. He stated that at first glance, when he saw her, he knew immediately that she was going to be his wife. Their marriage lasted lifelong, although Jung engaged in extramarital relationships. One of them was Sabina Spielrein, who at first became his patient. Sabina told Jung about her difficult childhood. Frequently has beaten her. She started to recover and herself became interested in the new field of psychoanalysis and began working as a research assistant for Jung. Being in a role of a patient and as an assistant at the same time, Sabina started to fall in love with him, and they developed a relationship. Sabina became a psychiatrist herself and had a thriving career. Her work was the start of modern views of attachment theory and relational psychoanalysis. In 1910, Tony Wolff entered analysis with Jung. Immediately, he was very impressed by her because he had a very good intellect. Tony Jung assisted Jung with research and became herself a famous analyst. After terminating Wolff's analysis, Jung had several dreams that indicated him a need to re-establish their relationship, which became increasingly intimate. The intensity of Jung's relationship with Tony Wolff initially caused tensions in his marriage, but eventually an understanding was reached as it became clear that Jung would never give up either Emma, his wife, nor Tony, whom is called his second wife. In 1913, it came to a divergence with Freud about the existence of paranormal phenomena and the collective unconscious, which Freud dismissed as nonsense. After their breakup, it was the onset of the First World War, Jung went through a difficult psychological transformation. He withdrew from public life. At that time, he was a professor teaching and having a patient, and experienced a confrontation with the unconscious. He had visions, heard voices, and he worried that at times he was on the threshold to psychosis or to schizophrenia. However, he decided that was a valuable experience. He used his sensibility to develop the technique of active imagination. Toni Wolff was a crucial figure in this time, understanding deep layers of Jung's unconscious, helping him to find meaning behind his fantasies, visions, and dreams. For most years, between 1913 and 1917, both Emma, his wife, and Toni supported Jung in this time, integrating his unconscious material. Later, from the 20s on, Jung regularly withdrew to the Bollingen Tower, a place very close to nature, where he dove deep into his psyche and touched the ground of his unconscious, his soul, one can say. Yes. The next slide is about the psychotherapeutic process Jung developed. He emphasized the centrality of emotional experience in psychotherapy. The defense of emotions cause stereotypical experiences and behavior, which is rooted in complexes and mainly are unconscious. Through the technique of active imagination, Jung aimed to induce a creative process. Working with inner images and dreams, layers of complex episodes are uncovered. A process of development is to be initiated in the patient, which leads to self-actualization, which he called the process of individuation, the manifestation of the true self. Essential for Jung was also spiritual and transcendent dimension of man. He sought for depth and meaning in the human soul. He saw relationships as containers. The deeper they go, the more they contain. Jung postulated a collective unconscious as inherited psychobiological structure of man, which consists of themes from cultural history, religions, myths, and fairy tales. Archetypes are understood as the agents of the collective unconscious, as the basic patterns of life. The inner contemplation of archetypes is numinous, ineffable, and goes very deep. It can trigger emotions and have motivating and regulating effects on the consciousness. Jung stated that archetypes are also culturally transformed and must be translated into the language of the present. The Jungian self corresponds with the archetype of wholeness and is created by realization of unconscious content. Dissociation and tensions are reduced in the process. One's own being becomes visible and tangible. In the process, there's also always a reconciliation with oneself. According to Jung, by touching this primordial ground, one comes into contact with the self-regulating powers of the psyche in which lies healing. So what when it comes to the Ayahuasca experience? I cite Benny Shannon, an Israeli professor of psychology. The study of ayahuasca requires substantive, long-term familiarity and training. No psychological investigation can fully unravel ayahuasca. Ayahuasca brings us to the boundaries of science, the Western worldview, and its philosophies. I state that ayahuasca is a fast catalyst that allows access to the personal and collective unconscious, including the reliving of autobiographical memories and the raise of vivid visions and symbols which give meaning and induce developmental processes. Also, unpleasant cathartic processes can be experienced, which can be described in Jung's words as encounters and work with the shadow. The parts in us that we cannot accept and are not lived are our shadow parts. Frequently, this results in projections on fellow human beings and partners. Without the integration of the evil, there is no wholeness. The ability to see your own shadow and take it into responsibility is a source for reconciliation. Jung stated that the religious need belongs to the essence of human beings. From cultural history, we recognize that people always have had a relationship to something that transcends them. The religious attitude is mediated by the experience of symbols that stimulate meaningfulness. Jung was deeply connected to nature. In ayahuasca drinkers, we also can observe a stronger connection to plants and animals. Reflections. Reflections on ethics and lifestyle, as well as feelings of love and affinity for nature and existence, are common. Jung influenced the psychology of the 20th century with his concepts, ideas, and theories. But he often remains controversial in the academic world, so does ayahuasca. In Western culture, since Descartes, spirituality and health were separated. In contrast, Jung emphasizes the psychospiritual aspects of human beings, whereby the soul is seen as a reality which interacts with the body. Among ayahuasca drinkers, it is frequently perceived that humans are also spiritual beings that think, feel, and have a body, which goes well along with their Jungian viewpoint. Therapies should speak to body and soul, addressing the sacred as a therapeutic resource. Ayahuasca blends somatic, symbolic, and collective dimensions. The layering of the effects and the directions given to them in rituals can make it meaningful. The therapeutic value of ayahuasca lies in specific environmental context of use and care that are not easily comprehensible in the biomedical paradigm. The framing and containment of therapeutic spaces are crucial for the development of transformative processes, both in ayahuasca and psychotherapy. A strong bond in the therapeutic relationship and a well-balanced maintenance of boundaries are most important. Looking back at Jung's mix of roles as therapist and close friend or lover would now be considered inappropriate. Therapists are required to maintain professional boundaries from their clients. A well-balanced stance with empathy, care, and respect should be established. Trespassing of boundaries can be subtle and cause damage in participants and should be addressed. Especially in the work with psychoactive substances, the risk of transgression is much higher due to increased suggestibility of the clients. For successful integration of psychotherapeutic processes into daily life, Jungian psychology offers a broad range of creative tools, for example, like mandala work or performance art, amongst others. It includes myths and fairy tales to create meaningfulness. It is a co-working process of therapist and client to connect with inner and outer resources, to foster self-healing, and to create a healthy social environment. In ayahuasca, we encounter a much more dynamic process which shows quick effects. For an integration work, Jungian psychology may offer grounding and reconnection to our own cultural heritage. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. They can be for any of the presenters. You can choose.
Me?
Yes.
Hello. This is for the Spanish presenter. You had mentioned that the ayahuasca opens a connection between the cortical parts of the brain and the limbic system. Is there functional MRI research, or what's the basis of that statement besides just an experiential aspect?
Yeah, well, what I talk about is just like observational case, but in the studies that have been made on PTSD and the studies that had been made on the psychopharmacology of ayahuasca, we can take the conclusion that ayahuasca works on the levels of communication between limbic system and prefrontal cortex that are interrupted in the PTSD syndrome. It's happening in the HPA axis, no? Hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis that manages the stress response on the brain, and on the hippocampus, that is the part of the limbic system that facilitates the passage of memory between implicit unconscious memory and explicit unconscious memory. So these are the places that we know that are blocked by PTSD, by stress, and ayahuasca has been shown that acts on these parts of the brain.
Anyone else? Here?
Thank you for the talks. The question would be to somebody from even pharmaceutical, the depression studies. Are there any studies if DMT is necessary for the antidepressant effect, or it's mainly the CAPI, or it's not really known? So yeah, that would be my question.
Okay, good question. But my English isn't very good. I need to translation. Okay? David?
Can you repeat the question? I'll translate for him.
Yeah. Also my question was, in the antidepressant effect who was shown, is there any maybe studies to see if it's only the beta carbolines, also the CAPI, or DMT is necessary to have in itself an antidepressant effect?
Existem vários estudos. Hoje eu mostrei. Oh, translation? Oh. Mostrei 3 estudos. Um com betas-carbolinas e um metabólito, o armol.
And one with the metabolic.
Acredita-se que esses metabólitos também ajam em funções de neurogênese. Foi mostrado funções em astrócitos, só através dos beta-carbolinas. Porém, no estudo de culturas de célula, onde não se tem o metabolismo, a armina não mostrou nenhum resultado em astrócitos. Já quando se teve o estudo em animais vivos, se tendo o metabolismo, Armina já teve o resultado. Possivelmente tenha sido o Armol. Em estudos de DMT, eles se ligam mais em receptores SIG1R. É um receptor onde se tem várias funções de neurogênese, além de funções no astrócitos, como efeitos antioxidantes para os neurônios. Porém, hoje eu não tive tempo de aprofundar no DMT. Mas existe uma grande quantidade de trabalhos apenas com DMT. Mas a importância da união dos dois faz com que tenham efeitos melhores. Ok?
Well, I thank everyone for being here. Now we can go to the coffee break. Thank you very much.